Okay, got it. I'm excited.
Are most people on Facebook, or they did come into the actual webinar?
They should be on Facebook, but we're live now.
Got it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. I'm so excited to welcome our special guest today. But before I introduce her, I really want to make sure you know who I am and what we do here. So good morning. My name is Jimmy Drayton, and I'm the Executive Director for Baltimore Family Alliance, formerly Downtown Baltimore Family Alliance, or DBFA. So Baltimore Family Alliance, we are a membership organization dedicated to supporting families living in the city of Baltimore. We achieve our mission by connecting communities and empowering families to advocate for great schools, safe streets, and vibrant neighborhoods, the three factors that matter most to families when deciding where to live. So obviously, if you don't know Dr. Seema Iyer, I'm excited today because we're talking about the census and what that means. We just got census data this year, census results, but I think it just matches what a lot of us have known for a couple of years now. So I'm going to let Dr. Iyer introduce herself and tell us about her research and her wonderful university, University of Baltimore. And I'll put myself on mute.
Thanks so much for the invitation. Great to see everybody this morning. And hopefully this is a conversation that is just the beginning of everything that we will be talking about. The data is new from the 2020 census, so we're all kind of digesting it. The news is not so great, but we have the opportunity, I think, using data to turn some of these stories around. So like I said, I oversee a project called the Baltimore Neighborhood Indicators Alliance at the University of Baltimore. We are right downtown, right at the corner of Mount Royal and Charles Street. And we are back in the office in case anybody wants to drop by and say hi. We have been at the University of Baltimore since 2007, and the project has been in existence since 2000, since we're in our 21st year. We've been doing this for a long time. And today I'm basically going to be very interactive. So hopefully, again, the resources that we can provide you are as interactive for you as possible beyond kind of whatever I tell you today, because it is ever changing and there's a lot to talk about, but we are going to focus in on a couple of different indicators that help explain what we saw with the 2020 census. So I am going to share my screen. I think that's going to work. And basically today show a couple of different interactive resources that you will always have at your disposal no matter what you're doing. So this is our main website. It's bniajfi.org, and maybe we could put that in the chat or on the Facebook page when we get to it. And we issue what's called the Vital Signs Report. We have more than 50 sources of data, and we issue about 150 different indicators using those sources of data that really describe a broad range of issues that affect our neighborhoods, because all of our neighborhoods essentially get affected by almost everything, right? Some may be affected less than others, but they're still affected. So we can come to our website, which is always available to you, to look at the data in three basic ways. One, you might really just know what community you want to have are interested in, so you can zoom in, you can look it up by address if you want. If you don't know what community you're in, you can zoom in and look at a particular community. This is where the University of Baltimore is, in the Midtown community, and you can see which neighborhoods the community covers. Our communities are a little bit bigger than individual neighborhoods. There are 55 communities in the city of Baltimore. But hopefully, obviously, all of your communities are covered, and you can get a good picture of change over time in all of our data for your community. So that's one way to do it, is look at your specific community and you get all the indicators for your community. You can do it by topic. So you can look at, if you're really interested in census demographics, you can just click on that and get all of our census demographics data. And then you can also look at it by a very specific indicator. And here, this is basically just a keyword search. And so if I put percent African-American residents. We do not have the 2020 data yet on our main website. That's coming soon. But for every indicator, whatever you do a keyword search on, if you hit go, you can then basically get a dedicated page for that indicator, which shows you kind of what the source was, what years we have them for, and then how you can look at change according to a bunch of different ways to visualize data. So the first way is just tabular. You can see kind of some neighborhoods have absolutely, practically no African-American, 2% in South Baltimore to 97% in Greater Rosemont. So huge disparity in terms of the kind of composition racially by our neighborhoods. That's tabular. You can look at it in terms of a graph. The default is alphabetical. And if you push this little button, you'll basically get to see basically the range of any one of our indicators. This happens to be percent African-American. And you can see that some neighborhoods have practically no African-American and some have practically exclusively African-American. And then you can see it in a trend or you can see it in a map. And so for those that might be familiar with Dr. Lawrence Brown from Morgan State and his new book, or maybe not quite so new book, called The Black Butterfly, this is essentially what he's referring to with this one indicator, that we have predominantly African-American neighborhoods out here in the West Side, and then a little bit more on the East Side here that essentially represent kind of the wings of our city. And if you come down the spine or the body of the city, not a whole lot of African-Americans living in here. And this is one city. So this is, again, our main website. It's up to 2019 so far. We're going to get to 2020 now that we have new data. And so what I wanted to show you, so this is kind of one way to just get to quick access, but we started to look at some of the 2020 census data because one of the most important indicators, we have 150 indicators on our website, and everybody should feel free to go whole hog on any one of those indicators. But I will say that the most important indicator that kind of leads to every other thing that we care about, we were a city that was built out by the 1950s, right? We were 950,000 people in the 1950s. And slowly the city has, and in some cases not so slowly, we have depopulated since the 1950s. But that depopulation hasn't occurred evenly in all of our neighborhoods. And in fact, what this map is showing, the areas in blue between 2010 and 2020, obviously with the new 2020 census data that came out, these are the neighborhoods that actually grew in that last decade, even though the city overall actually lost 6% of its population. So we have, unfortunately, coming down that spine of the city and coming out to the southeast side, which is what Dr. Brown refers to as the white L, although I will show you that the population is not necessarily white. What he's referring to is the power structures in these neighborhoods may be predominantly white. But the population that lives here is actually getting to be pretty diverse. But in the areas that we saw that were predominantly African-American, we see continued loss of population, and not just a little bit of loss. This is dramatic loss, more than 10%, and in some cases more than 20 and 30% loss of population in just 10 years. This is like a tsunami of loss. And when we see just people moving out or passing away and nobody there behind them to essentially replace that housing stock, that's what we tend to see. All of the other problems that we care about. If you lose overall population, what are you losing? You're losing children. And that is a reduction in enrollment in your school. And so your school ends up having lesser and lesser resources because the surrounding neighborhood is losing population. So that's obviously what families are going to care about, making sure that enrollment stays high or at least stable, which means that you need to actually stabilize the population in the surrounding neighborhood and stabilize them with families if you want to have kids coming into the school system. So if you see population loss, you're probably also going to see enrollment loss. And that becomes a point where we can start thinking potentially about school closings, where we see school closings are happening in exactly these neighborhoods that are losing population. The other things that will happen, Number one indicator for population loss is empty buildings. And some of them may still be habitable, but just nobody living in them, which is a problem for all of the other neighbors that are in the area. And some of them become uninhabitable, which is the code violation that the city issues for a vacant building notice. Either case, whether they're still habitable but unoccupied or uninhabitable, it's both bad for the neighborhood. And neighbors know, the city might know the ones that are uninhabitable and have the boarded up windows and maybe the tree growing out of the roof. But neighbors know which houses are just empty, because you essentially end up kind of having to maintain or watch not only your own place, but the surrounding places that are empty too. So you have kind of double duty, or in some cases triple duty, to maintain your block if you see a lot of houses that start to go unoccupied, even if they're technically habitable. So getting people to move into these houses that are not occupied right now is kind of a number one thing that we need to make sure that neighborhoods know how to do. And so, like I just said, I just told you one thing. Whether a neighborhood has grown in the last decade or has declined, and it becomes what's called correlated with all these other things that neighborhoods care about. When you see that population decline, you're going to lose retailers, because retailers follow where there's growth. And retail includes food. You know, the grocery store is a retailer, or a storefront bank is a retailer. Most of our banking is now online. So actually having a storefront bank in your neighborhood is a luxury item. And they tend to go in places where they're seeing a lot of population growth. They're not going in neighborhoods where they're seeing a population decline, unfortunately. And so again, this is the whole suite of things that a neighborhood starts to lose because the overall population of a neighborhood is slowly declining. And unfortunately, what happens is that we see some neighborhoods are growing like gangbusters, right? The downtown area, the inner harbor, many of these have grown by 30%. And I'm going to show you exactly how to get to the actual number for each one of these areas. And then I'm also going to show you kind of by neighborhood how to look at change over time. And so it becomes a little bit of a tale of two cities, right? We have and in your alliance, like thinking about how families can align, we have some families that are experiencing a whole different set of issues than some families that are living in growing neighborhoods, which actually have a different set of problems, right? Congestion, overcrowding in the schools. And in some of our neighborhoods, we're talking about school closings. So finding common ground when the neighborhoods themselves are experiencing such vastly different experiences just on population change, that becomes something that you might want to think about. How do you build a coalition of families when they're experiencing something very different? Something like families living in neighborhoods that are declining need to form their own coalition, and families that are in neighborhoods that are growing need to form their own coalition. And then you can start finding common ground across, because the issues are just totally different. So I also want to mention, kind of just stepping back. So this is kind of zooming in on the neighborhoods of the city of Baltimore. I want to step back and say that this is very unusual that our city is even losing any kind of population. If we look at, and in fact, I'll put this blog post in the chat too. This was a decade that was a huge win for cities nationally. New York grew by 7%, Philadelphia grew by 5%, Newark, New Jersey grew by 10%, Richmond grew by 10%, Washington, DC grew by more than 10%. Every other city on the East Coast between Washington or Richmond and Boston, kind of our sister cities here along I-95 or the megalopolis region of the United States, they all grew in this decade. And if we think about from the 1950s up until 2000, we all shared a very common history. All of us were losing population. All of these cities, Philadelphia, New York, who remembers in the 1970s, New York was, potentially going to go into bankruptcy. In the 1990s, Washington, DC was considered the murder capital of the nation. All of these cities that are so similar to us historically, so similar to us geographically and locationally, they have all turned themselves around, except Baltimore. So from really kind of zooming out a little bit, We're the only city on the East Coast with lost population. So we have got a problem. We've got an existential problem that we have got to figure out. And again, thinking about coalitions, how do we band together to kind of stop the overall loss for our city? And then we can also kind of address the overall loss in some of our neighborhoods. So it is not okay that some neighborhoods are growing and some neighborhoods are declining. We don't have to live like this. And we have examples of cities just up and down I-95 where they are turning themselves around. And so we should learn from them, figure out what it is that they've done, and use the data to try and figure out what it is that is not happening in Baltimore, but is happening somewhere else. Now, we have some thoughts on that, which maybe we can talk about. But in general, I just want to kind of show that this is a problem. Nationally also, it's been a problem for many, many rural areas. This is the first census between 2010 and 2020, where so many rural areas in the nation lost population. So if we look at the state of Maryland, really the only places that lost population were on the western side and some on the southern eastern shore. And unfortunately, the big donut in the middle, which is Baltimore, that lost population. But all of the other counties that are suburban and non-rural all gained. Frederick County was the biggest gainer, and Howard County was the biggest gainer in the state of Maryland. But all of them kind of grew in the central Maryland region, except for Baltimore. So that's, again, not necessarily great news, but we have got to take this news and actually turn ourselves around. So again, also I mentioned that we see kind of a population change. I want to show you two quick things that hopefully you can take a look at yourself. So we have put together an interactive map for you to see how things have changed. And the Baltimore Planning Department has also put together an interactive map that's meant for everybody to use. So if you come to our interactive site, which you can see now, the first thing that you'll see is all of the communities. And remember, our communities are a little bit larger than neighborhoods. They were made up of a couple of different neighborhoods. The planning department site is by neighborhood. So both of these together hopefully are good resources for you all. But you can see some of our neighborhoods that lost 29% in Sandtown, Winchester, right next door practically to downtown, that gained 46% of its population. So literally a tale of two kind of experiences so close together. We see lots of growth here on the southeast side, pretty stable kind of in the north and the northwest, and then a little bit stable coming out into the actual west. So the Beachfield neighborhood out here. Oh my God, my mouse is just going crazy here. Sorry about that. Hopefully nobody has vertigo. And then you can also take a look at the same data by race. So you can look at where we've seen African-American population growth. Overall, we actually lost African-American and white population, but you can see we're kind of redistributing where people are. So even though we have a kind of severe, not severe, but significant loss of African-American overall, we have overall population loss. And then even within that, we have African-American loss. But we see growth in African-American populations up here in the Northeast and down here in the Southwest, which is interesting, especially Morrill Park, which is traditionally a white neighborhood, is becoming a little bit more African-American. And then you can see where we have significant African-American loss here in the East, which is largely obviously due to a lot of redevelopment that's happening around the Hopkins Hospital.
Dr. Iyer, quick question. I'm sorry. Are we able to see it by income as well?
Not yet by income. That'll come in December. And then the white population, you can see where we're seeing a little bit of growth in white, and then in this Inner Harbor area that we're seeing kind of growth in white. And then I think the big story is that we are seeing significant increases in the Hispanic population and significant increases in the Asian population. So let me just quickly mention that before I do take any questions and we can have a conversation. So this app is something that the city of Baltimore has created, the planning department, which is just fantastic. And this actually shows you those changes in population by neighborhood. And I do want to kind of do a quick demo on how to use their site where you can kind of aggregate up some neighborhoods and see. But overall, you can see that the African-American population, which is still our largest proportion, more than 60% of the population of the city of Baltimore is African-American, but we have lost 15% of that in the last 10 years. And then about 20% of our population, 25% is white, and we lost about 11%. And so in some ways, a big story is that we gained 77% of Hispanic population and 46% of Asian population. So even though they are still relatively small numbers, 4%, 6% of the population, they're the gainers. We actually are gaining both Asian and Hispanic, which I think is something that other cities on the East Coast have been doing for many years, gaining in the Asian and Hispanic populations. And Baltimore has been slow on that uptake. So the overall population for the city of Baltimore, again, declining in stark contrast to some of these other cities. And one of the reasons being is that we tend to not attract immigrants and other kind of minorities to the city, which is something to think about. So what is awesome about this website is that you can then select specific neighborhoods. And so maybe you can kind of shout out some neighborhoods that we should, maybe downtown. We can do kind of Federal Hill, whatever, you could actually pick whichever ones you want, Inner Harbor. And then what happens is that the website dynamically shifts to show you the specifics for those 3 neighborhoods. I just picked 3. So now you can see there was a 95% change in the Black population in these neighborhoods. So it's increased to 2.7 thousand people, and an increase of 20% in the white, which is really interesting, and also an increase in the Asian and Hispanic. So things to just really show the difference, but the neighborhood difference experience. So this is actually a very diverse part of town, right? It has lots of Hispanic, Asian, Black, and white, which is unfortunately unique in the city overall, because I showed you have some neighborhoods where it's 97% African-American and only 97% white. And so downtown becomes pretty unique, having kind of this level of diversity in the neighborhoods. So I think I'm exactly on time, but that's the overall kind of message so far, is that we are having growth in Hispanic and Asian. We're unfortunately the only city on the East Coast. We have got to turn this around. We don't have to live like this. We don't have to kind of follow the route of a Detroit or a Cleveland that's like planning for decline. I don't think we should be planning for decline. We should be planning for growth, be with our other sister cities here on the East Coast, and figure out what we need to do to change this.
Thank you, Dr. Iyer. I mean, I was writing my notes. I should have took my camera off because my face was like with you. I was like, this is to me such an emergency at the city level that it should be all hands on deck. Like, how do we retain our families and how do we attract our families? And one of the things, and I'll say this briefly and then open it up to Abby and Brianna and Sophie, is what I loved about Downtown Baltimore Family Alliance was that it was very specific to the families downtown, which is to me why we see the growth now, is because they were able to form those bonds and focus on those schools, and so hyper focused that people were like, look, if you do it, if you stay, I'll stay. And when I talk to a lot of the families that are still in the organization, they tell me, I mean, it's like the same story over and over. They were single, they were attracted to Baltimore for a job or for a spouse. They met their spouse here at the bars downtown. And then they got married and they committed to stay. But when I talk to the Black families, it's not like that. There's really no place in East and West Baltimore for them to go to the bar, meet a spouse. There's nothing concentrated for a lot of families out in the other parts of the city. And it was interesting to me, and I hope you could touch on it really quickly. I don't see a lot of growth and like above Charles Village either, like where you see downtown has grown exponentially.
Yes, yeah, good point. I told you that even though those northern neighborhoods are holding their own, but In some ways, they don't really have the space to grow. There's not a lot of, there's rehabilitation and maintenance of those properties, but there's not a lot of like major development going on in the north part of the city. So there's not necessarily huge space to grow, but they are maintaining, which even to maintain, you still need to attract people in, because people naturally will move away. And unless your neighborhood has a reason for people to come into your neighborhood, you will start to decline. So that even to stay stable, you have to attract. Which is probably a little bit counterintuitive. To grow, you actually need to actually grow, and that's development, and that's more construction. There's not a lot of that going on in the Northeast, so they're staying, they're holding their own, which is okay, better than decline. And then, coming out into the east side of town, you see that's where a lot of growth is happening. A lot of construction, a lot of new development.
Yes. So I'm going to shut up after this. I promise you all, because I want everyone else to that to me means city, you need to support organizations like Live Baltimore. I do not work for Live Baltimore, but they do a bang up job. This should be coming from city coffers. I get so pissed off. To me, they should be really supporting your research. And trust me, I have not met Dr. Iyer in person before this. I've gone to the Bina days, but this is something that we should really, instead of giving some of these multi-million-dollar tips and all this other foolishness to people, we need to be saying, you know what, all hands on deck. We need to have tax money going straight to Live Baltimore, straight to Bina, not because I like them necessarily, although I do, but because we have to attract more families. We cannot get those families back that have left. It's over, it's done. We can't do it. We need to retain the families that are currently in the city and focus heavily on attracting new families and new people so that we can replenish the people that we have lost. So I'll shut up now. Any other people have questions, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask.
I think for me, it's more, a comment, and just seeing this data is really eye-opening. I think we sort of know it, but seeing actual proof, helpful and also eye-opening. But I think, this is one of the reasons that we were interested at Port Discovery to hear and take a look at this, is we're really trying to think of how do we serve our children and families that are here? How do we come up with programming and events and opportunities that help attract people to feel like, they've got a lot to do and see and enjoy in the city, and they don't necessarily have to go elsewhere. So not necessarily a question yet, just it's helpful to see this and know that there are some partners, I think, that are very much on the camp of trying to do what we can to retain and attract families to our area.
So thanks for the comment, and thanks obviously for the big push and support. Thanks for the kind words. But I will say, all of us are Live Baltimore. We are all Live Baltimore in our neighborhoods. We actually have to take that mantle and be the Live Baltimore of our neighborhood. Live Baltimore has a very specific mission, and they're awesome and they do their thing, but they can't be everywhere. And all of us should never take for granted that if that for sale sign goes up, that there is going to be somebody that picks it up. I mean, granted, the housing market is just insane at this moment because of the pandemic. So maybe it will get picked up, but you also want to be in front of that. So who's moving in? Who are the realtors in your neighborhood even marketing to? Do you even have realtors? So really working, because that's what Live Baltimore does, is that it educates realtors to basically figure out how to sell the neighborhood in a way that's authentic. Well, you can do that in your own neighborhood. There are specific realtors that kind of work your neighborhood. If you are a leader of a neighborhood, I would start having monthly conversations with your realtors or bi-monthly conversations, and just have them come tell you who's coming in to see your properties. Where are things getting marketed? What are they saying that they either like or don't like? Why would they or why wouldn't they come in? And if they say they chose a different neighborhood over yours, that's basically marketing reconnaissance, right? What is it about your neighborhood that you can't attract people to come in? Now, some of the problems are huge. Lack of jobs in some neighborhoods, high vacancy in some neighborhoods. Those are big, big, big problems. Lack of access to jobs is probably the biggest problem for some of our neighborhoods. Like I said, the retailers leave, when you see the population loss. And what is retail? Retail is the vast majority of our jobs. And so the jobs are leaving those neighborhoods. And so employed persons in those neighborhoods have to travel farther and farther to get to work because the jobs have left the neighborhood. And then when I tell everybody, you want to track how many people are traveling so far to get to work from within your own neighborhood. We have an indicator called the 45-minute commute time. And if you see that 45-minute commute time rising, it is rising for the entire city. And in some neighborhoods, it's rising disproportionately. What is that? And it's not just an esoteric indicator. 45-minute commute time for the people that are working. These are the people that are working, right? These are people with some means in a neighborhood. But you've just lost them every day for an hour and a half at least. So what can't they do? They cannot come to the parent-teacher conversation. They cannot come to, the PTA meeting or whatever. They can't come to the yard cleanup or neighborhood meeting because they are not there. And so if you see that indicator growing in your neighborhood has got to shift on how they continue to engage with the folks that are traveling. You might have to have, obviously with the pandemic, all kinds of things have changed. You might have to change the way you interact with people that are traveling that far. But these are kind of unusual indicators. But once you see your realtors actually hear all of it. So I would definitely have tea with your realtors or coffee with your realtors and figure out what they're hearing from people that might be coming to look. And if you don't have realtors, we actually have realtor deserts in some of our neighborhoods where there's nobody selling some of these properties, which is a different problem. You need to home grow some realtors that can, it's a job. It's a way to kind of earn a living, which is a good thing, but then also they would be able to sell your neighborhood. So in some ways, we all are Live Baltimore. We should always be welcoming people into our neighborhood. But to let them know that they're coming into your neighborhood, right? It's not that they're taking over your neighborhood, but you want to welcome them into the fold. So each one of our neighborhoods need to be equipped and skilled on how to essentially be their own Live Baltimore.
That's interesting. One of the questions I had was, obviously with a decrease in population, what will that impact on our city services?
Yeah, so like I said, there's some folks that say to me, well, Detroit and Cleveland and, some of those cities, they lost even more population, which is true. But they are actually planning for decline. They're planning where they're going to stop having city services to some parts of the city because they can't maintain the roads there, or they can't maintain the water system going to those neighborhoods, or they can't maintain the properties. So they are decommissioning neighborhoods in Detroit. They're decommissioning. I mean, Detroit went into bankruptcy as a way to kind of do this. Cleveland literally has an entire plan of how to bring the city back to being fully green. How do you daylight streams and get rid of streets so you don't have to keep paving them? It's an amazing plan, a great way to think about it. But is that what we want? Are we trying to decommission some of these neighborhoods that saw a 30% population loss? That's a huge, I hope not. I hope that's not what our plan is. I hope our plan is for growth. And so to grow even 20 years from now, you need to lay the seeds now. So I'm from Philadelphia originally. I don't know if anybody's from Philly, but Philadelphia, such a similar city to Baltimore, right? So similar in so many ways. It's posted a 5% increase in population in the last decade. That's the biggest increase in population Philadelphia has seen since the 1950s. Yay! We also have had similar stories coming out of Philadelphia: crime, poor quality schools, high vacancy rates. It's all the same story among all our cities, and yet people are moving in there. So what are they doing that we're not doing? And being a child of Philadelphia and having followed kind of the history of Philadelphia for a long time, one of the things that Philadelphia did back in the 80s, and actually Washington, same thing for those that might be familiar from Washington, one of the things that they did in the 1980s, 1970s even, was invest in their transit system. So Philadelphia used to be that you would come in from the north and you'd have to change at Reading Terminal to keep going south. And Reading Market is above Reading Terminal. And in 1985, thanks to a lot of federal dollars that came into cities in the 1970s, they closed that connection. And so you can go from Newark, Trenton, New Jersey to Newark, Delaware in one shot, in one system without ever transferring, which is kind of amazing. But that investment happened in 1980 or completed in 1985. And from that investment, then you got Reading Terminal reconstructed, and then you had the convention center, and then you had a lot of development in the downtown, and then you had a lot of residential development right around it. And so Philadelphia is now reaping the benefits of investment that happened in the 1980s. Baltimore cannot be chasing 1985 Philadelphia. So we do have a transit system problem. We basically don't have much transit. And so if you look at where the growth has happened, people are making very rational decisions. Growth has happened exactly where we have highways, exactly where I-83 is, exactly where I-95 is, because you can get into and out of the city very quickly. You can just imagine where you might live right now. You probably have very easy access to one of these highways. And areas like Greater Rosemont, Forest Park, it's actually hard to just get to some of those neighborhoods. It used to be that that's how you got out of the city, right? You come out Liberty Avenue, you come out Route 40, but now people just go around the city on the Beltway. And so everywhere that we invested in highways in the last 40 years, that's exactly where we're seeing growth happen in the entire metropolitan region. We're seeing growth happen all around I-695, all along I-95, up and down Maryland. And so we invested in highways, and that's exactly where we're investing in residential growth. That's not to say that I want more highways in the city of Baltimore. And while I would love to say I want more transit in the city of Baltimore, that's not going to happen anytime soon. So what can we do in the meantime that's very 21st century? You know, in 1985, Philadelphia put the best technological system at the time. Well, 45 years had passed. So what can we do now? What's the best technological system now? You know, taking advantage of the apps like Lyft and Uber in these areas that have declined. I say, first of all, give everybody a free bus pass and get them access to at least the bus system, because we have that right now. And let's everybody use the bus system as it is. We can all complain about it, but unless we use it, it's never going to get better. So in every neighborhood that declined by more than 10%, I say we have a policy that you get a free bus pass, whether you're a child, an adult, whatever. And we all commit to using the bus at least once a week to do something and see how good or bad it is. And then if there is a complaint, you're a legitimate user of the system and you can complain. And let's get the best bus system on the planet here in Baltimore right now. Because if we have it right now, it's not going to cost us nearly as much as like putting in fixed rail. And we can see that that's one of our biggest distinctions between us and some of these other cities along the East Coast. If you come from New York City and you move to Baltimore, you shouldn't also have to buy a car. It's actually kind of perverse. There's people that do move from New York and say, why do I have to own a car now? I was very happy not owning a car before. In Washington, D.C., grew by about 100,000 people in the last 20 years, but the number of residential parking permits has not increased at all because people don't need a car. So we have to get to a carless world in Baltimore, but we're not going to do that with fixed rail anytime soon. So what can we do in the meantime? I say we get the best bus system on the planet and put down that gauntlet and let's make that work. Or something. You know, I'm not necessarily a transit expert, but you can see why Baltimore has a flow problem, right? If you're not even flowing into some of our neighborhoods, you're not even going to see the houses to even think that you don't want to move there. And so you could see where people see kind of movement in the highway system, then you have a shot at saying, oh, maybe I want to move there because I've seen it. Create experiences that bring people into these neighborhoods. The libraries are one big way that we can create places where people can congregate and gather and things like that. You know, arts and cultural opportunities in some of our neighborhoods, but make it so that you can get there for free if you use the bus or something. Whatever it takes, we've got to be very bold. We've got to be very we've got to really turn this around, because we cannot use another decade where we see population loss. It's only going to impact kind of our children in particular, because they're not going to want to live in a city like ours if this is their experience, right? They're seeing kind of decline all around them.
Hi, everyone. So this is Jamia again. That's really interesting that you gave us some good concrete examples and suggestions, because as we know, the state has a surplus. This is the time to ask. And I think if we can coordinate as organizations and as communities and say, we have a problem, this is what we need to ask the state for to start that investment for the next 10 years, right? So that our attractions, our downtown, our uptown, our east and west communities, we're on the, to me, we should all be on the same page. Like, this is what we need to ask the state for investment in our communities, but also in our, what you said, arts and culture institutions. How do we not just give capital funding, but operational funding? You know, one of the issues I know with Rexham Park is they have money to build, but not money to maintain. And I don't know how we get the city to say, you know what, this is the layout, this is the plan, this is how we're going to support, but this is how we're going to invest in the next 10 years.
And notice it's not one answer, right? It's not, it has to be a suite of different answers. They're all hopefully very bold. So now we have these neighborhoods that have a 21st century school, for example, brand new schools. And if you look at, I might show you brand new schools in some of our neighborhoods, and you guys would probably even know better than me, but let me show you the city's own comprehensive educational facility master plan. This is enrollment change. Like I said, if you're losing population, you're also losing students. This is enrollment change by community in the last 7 school years from 2015 to 2021. It's the same map, right? This is where we're losing students. And in some cases, we actually have 21st century schools being built in these neighborhoods that have seen a loss of enrollment. Like Dorothy I. Heights is here in Greater Mondawmin. I think Calvin Rodwell is, or Liberty maybe, is up here in Forest Park. All 21st century schools. And I think out here, Mary Rodman is out here, I think. Something like that. Sorry, I'm bad with the school names. But I know Dorothy I. Heights is in Reservoir Hill and Penn North. And we've seen a reduction in enrollment. That is the opposite of sustainability for maintaining that school building moving forward if we're seeing declines in enrollment. So we've done the big ticket thing, right? Getting a brand new school here. And now we've got to figure out how to support the neighborhood around it. Or ideally, at the same time, we would have been figuring out how to support the neighborhood around it so that people will choose this neighborhood, because they can choose any neighborhood, right? And so your neighborhood is effectively competing for potential residents, and you've got to compete. And I don't mean that in a bad way. That means that you've got to continuously provide something that would be meaningful, not only to your own current residents, or especially to your own current residents, but also to future residents.
Just wonderful. I mean, Dr. Iyer, if no one's told you today, I'm telling you, you are brilliant. Oh my gosh, brilliant, brilliant, brilliant.
The good news is that the data is telling us. The data is literally, I'm like a data whisperer. The data is telling us exactly what is happening. I hope all of you take that mantle and be data whisperers yourself. Use the data to your own advantage, because you can now tell a better story that can advocate for change. And hopefully everything boils down to, are people moving into your neighborhood or are people not? And we have to address why that might be true and really get into the weeds of that, because it is the weeds. There's something going on in the mechanics of how this is working that is not working. It's come to a grinding halt in some of our neighborhoods. And only the people on the ground in those neighborhoods are going to be able to kind of undo those gears and get those gears flowing. And hopefully our data can help you do that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Iyer. I've had such a good time this morning. I've never enjoyed myself with data so much.
Thanks so much for the invitation.
No, and this is it for me. Again, I just want to make sure people know we are we are a membership organization. It is free to have a membership. So please, any Baltimore family is eligible. Let's advocate in our communities for more programs like this, but also so that we can say our neighborhood is amazing. Let's advocate so we can have better arts and culture experiences. Let's all go to Port Discovery together, and then we'll take a trip and get some ice cream or from the Charmery. Whatever we need to do to build those connections and build better community is what I want to do. So I thank you again, Dr. Iyer from University of Baltimore and Bina, and have a great day, everyone.